everyone, it's Leela from Miss Kiss Creations. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do an acrylic swirl on a stainless steel tumbler. What you'll need is a stainless steel tumbler prepped. I am using my base coat as purple, but you can use any color you like. You need some gloves. You are needing acrylic paint, some epoxy, measuring cups, Dixie cup, and a popsicle stick or any type of a stir stick. So I went ahead and I've already mixed my epoxy, and then what I do after I mix my epoxy, I mixed actually an entire cup of part A and part B. So I mix 1 fluid ounce of each part. I'm not going to use all that. I am making another cup after this video, so I just went ahead and I made a batch, but I did fill up each tumbler, or each cup with epoxy. So mixed epoxy. I mixed 4 cups of my medicine cups with epoxy, right here if you can see them. So 2 there and 2 here, and I did 10 milliliters of each cup. Here you go. So I did 10 milliliters of each cup of epoxy right there. And that is going to be for my 4 acrylic paint colors. I'm doing a purple tumbler, and I am using all apple barrel acrylic paint that I did purchase from Walmart. I'm going to be using the color white, lavender, velvet crush, and purple pansy. And I will list all of these colors in my description below. So what you want to do first, after you have your tumbler nice and primed, if you don't know how to prime your tumbler, I do have a video on how to prime your tumbler. You're going to put your plain epoxy, so your non-acrylic painted epoxy, onto the tumbler. And like I said, I mixed 10 milliliters into each cup that you see in the video. And then I have just plain clear epoxy that's just mixed with nothing added in here, just for the base to put around my tumbler. And let me turn this spinner the other way for y'all to see. There you go. And don't forget the bottom of your tumbler. This is a great beginner's tumbler if I have a lot of beginner watchers. If you were watching this and you're a beginner, this is great for beginners. This was one of my first techniques that I did over and over again. And I really became to love it. And it's really easy. There's no glitter involved, but you can add glitter if you like. This is just an inspiration video, so you can add glitter. But this is just showing you an easy way to make a beautiful tumbler with cheap supplies, and it's very simple. Like I said, I have the apple barrel acrylic paint. I got those from Walmart. They run from 50 cents to $1.50 each, depending on what color you're getting. So you can use any colors you like, but this is just how to get the technique. Okay, so I have not a heavy coat, but not a thin coat, because you don't, if you have a thin coat, the colors aren't going to swirl. So I'm not applying a lot of pressure with my hands or with my finger. I'm just applying a little bit of pressure just to get a nice even coat on the tumbler. And I am going to change my gloves. While doing tumblers, I change my gloves like 2 or 3 times per cup, only because if I don't change gloves, you'll get epoxy everywhere. I even change my gloves and I still get epoxy everywhere. So as this is spinning, I'm gonna pour my acrylic paint into my epoxy here. And you only need a little drip. If you pour too much acrylic paint into your tumbler, or into your, I don't know why I keep saying tumbler. If you pour too much acrylic paint into your cup, you will have sticky acrylic paint mixed with epoxy. So let me show you how much you pour in here. You only pour a a drip or two, and that will last you. Now the lighter colors, you are gonna pour more. Like the white, I'm gonna drip more into the tumbler, into the cup. Go. And the darker colors, you're not gonna pour as much. And then we have one more. I should have one more somewhere around here. Right here, it's hiding. And then I'm gonna drip the white. Like I said, you want more for the lighter color, so the white I always add a little bit more. And then you're gonna stir them. Don't worry about any bubbles right now. We will hit this with a heat gun, so it's gonna pop the bubbles. And if you need to add more, the way you can tell that you need to add more, if the paint and the epoxy is transparent. So you don't want the epoxy, I don't want the epoxy to be transparent for the look that I get. So I probably need to add a little bit more white in here because it is a little transparent. And then I'm just gonna stir it. And I'm gonna do this for every single color. I have all of my paint stirred in my epoxy. If I did add too much paint, like I said, it's going to be a bit sticky, but thankfully I do have an extra batch of epoxy over here to the side. So I just added more epoxy to it if it was a little sticky here. Okay, so I'm just gonna adjust my camera. And now you have the epoxy here, it's kind of stuck to the tumbler. And now I'm going to hit each cup with a heat gun. Just for a couple seconds, just to loosen up the epoxy some. Every time I pour it on the tumbler, I just hit it with the heat gun. And now all you're going to do, let me adjust my camera just a little higher. There we go. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your popsicle stick and just string it along the tumbler like so. It is that easy. Like I said, I have this purple background. Sometimes I use white, but since it's a purple tumbler, I just kept the purple background. And I did spray my tumbler with satin finish. This is satin. I will post the color. I don't know the color off the top of my head, but I will post the color in the description when I'm finished with the video. Make sure you stir the paint completely. I don't know how to explain, but make sure you don't see any chunks inside of the paint, inside of the epoxy. You don't want any chunks. If there's chunks in there, then you haven't stirred the paint all the way. And then I'm just going to take my other color. Now I can see this color is a bit transparent, so I'm going to add a little bit more purple. You can always add more. So don't be like me and be too heavy-handed with some stuff. And just stir that. I'm just stirring it, and then I'm going to get my heat gun just to pop the bubbles. And then I'm going to string the next color of epoxy onto the tumbler. And I don't like to go this way all the way each side to the tumbler. I like to stop like in the middle, if you guys can see that on the camera. I don't like to go all the way across the tumbler. I stop kind of in the middle. It makes kind of a swirl effect whenever I hit it with the heat gun at the end. So I do prefer that way. And I'm getting the bottom. All I'm doing is I'm taking the paint and the epoxy and I'm just letting it drip on the edge of the bottom of the tumbler, and it gets the bottom there. All the way around. And the cool thing about these tumblers is whenever you do them, it'll start out looking one way, and then by the time you're finished, it will be completely different. Even when it spins for a couple hours, you'll see that it's different. Now I did make this lavender color. I don't know if it's going to show up on this tumbler, but we'll see how it looks. I'm just hitting it with the heat gun again just to loosen up the epoxy and acrylic paint. One thing about acrylic paint is that it does make the epoxy very sticky very quickly. So this is kind of, you have to move kind of quickly with this. Okay, so that looks kind of pink against the other ones, but that's okay. It's still a shade of purple. And with this one, since it's not a white background, you can't really tell the spots where I've missed with acrylic paint. So that's why I like making the background the same color as the color scheme that I'm working with. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to my darker purple, and I'm going to add more. The heat gun that I'm using, it is from Lowe's. It costs about $20. It's a Wagner. And you can be creative with this. The customer didn't want any glitter, but if she did, I would have just added glitter right into the epoxy with the acrylic paint. Then I'm going to get my next darkest color. And just string that on the same way. And I don't forget about the bottom, so I'm just taking my popsicle stick, I'm running it along the edge of the bottom, and it kind of drips down. And don't forget the edge. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this turn, and it's going to kind of move in its own way. And then after I let it turn, I'm going to hit it a little bit with the heat gun. And now I'm going to hit it with the heat gun. So what I did was I hit it with the heat gun on low with my Wagner heat gun, and I was about 5 to 6 inches away from the tumbler. I do put it on low now because, like I said, I'm very heavy-handed with this, and I'd rather put it on low and add more heat than put it on high. Sometimes if you put it on high, or if you put it too close to the tumbler, the heat will make the epoxy and the colors kind of mush together, and it might make mud. So I'm going to let this spin for a minute, and then I am going to add some white. The customer wanted a little bit of white in here, so I'm just going to add a little bit of white. And with the white, I am actually carrying the popsicle stick from the other side, left and right, over the tumbler. So I'm not doing it close like this, like Z's. I'm doing long strokes because I don't want that much white in this tumbler. So kind of like you're throwing the colors onto the tumbler. Okay. Or onto your desk because I sling it across the desk. Then I'm going to hit this a little bit with the heat gun. Again, I'm going to hit it on low, about 5 to 6 inches away from my tumbler. I'm gonna add a little bit of white to the bottom because I didn't get the bottom with any white. And like I said, whenever I do the bottom, I just let it drip on the edge, and it drips all the way down on the bottom of the tumbler. This tumbler, like I said, it's so perfect for beginners. And the great thing about this is if you don't want a decal on this tumbler, after this dries, it's ready to go. You can see right here, it did make kind of a little swirl effect. So it's gonna spin the next 20 minutes to an hour. It's going to spin and create its own little swirls in there. The important thing to remember with this is always put that coat of clear epoxy on here before you place the acrylic paint. Whenever I first started doing this, I only put acrylic paint on my plain spray painted cup. It was fine, it looked fine, but it was such a hassle to make the color swirl and to get a full even covered cup. So always remember to I put about 5 milliliters of epoxy on my 20-ounce cup. And I'm gonna hit this with a heat gun one more time. I am a little closer to the tumbler now, just to make the colors move just a little bit more. And now I'm gonna leave it alone because I know if I keep attacking it with the heat gun, it's going to mush together and it's not gonna come out well. So let me get closer to this. This is the finished product so far. I will let this spin for 4 to 6 hours, and then I will let it dry for another 18 to 20 hours. So leaving it spinning and drying a total of 24 hours. Sometimes it takes longer or shorter time to dry. After about 4 to 6 hours, I kind of come to the tumbler, and I always check the bottom of the tumbler to see if it's sticky, because if you have your hand mark on the bottom, that's an easier fix than fixing your hand mark on the top of the tumbler. So every time when you're checking to see if your tumbler is dry or cured, always touch the bottom of it. All right, and I will be back when it's done spinning. So it's been about an hour since the tumbler's been spinning, and you can kind of see the difference in it already. This is probably going to be how it looks at the end. But you can see that the colors swirled into each other a little more.